Hello again, and welcome to No Coast Spies Around the NFL. I'm Robert Zaglinski, joined by Danny Troutman and a stranger, Nate Vieira, um,
Back.
joining us just in time for the start of the regular season, as he likes to call it, January. His Patriots are finally playing again in games that matter. He once told us that the regular season is basically the preseason, which is how Patriots fan, I guess, would look at it. And we're on the verge of the divisional weekend, wild card weekend, a crazy one. Powerball, so the country's going crazy over billions of dollars, going crazy over the NFL. I mean, it all connects together. How are you guys,
Can't complain about a thing.
Nate?
Feeling like $1 billion.
Literally feeling like $1 billion. Let's get right into the action. Chiefs Texans probably. I don't think anybody had an expectation that Houston was necessarily going to win. But let's talk about what happened here. Brian Hoyer committed 5 turnovers for the Texans. Basically, one of the most incompetent quarterback performances ever. Bill O'Brien switched over to Brandon Weeden towards the end. From the opening outset, Niles Davis returned to kick for the Chiefs. Was enough. I mean, a 30-0 shutout. What are your guys' takeaways from this? Nate, let's go first from a Texans perspective.
Well, the Texans weren't very good, I thought, throughout the whole year. I was never a fan of the AFC South to begin with. I thought like whoever won that division really didn't even matter for the playoffs. Whoever they were going to play in the wild card was going to win. But for the Texans to put up a donut in the playoffs for their first playoff game in a while, it's kind of embarrassing. Their QB situation's been up in the air. They've had like 4 different QBs all year, and they just couldn't find one to work. Just J.J. Watt was playing through like a groin injury, I think. DeAndre Hopkins couldn't get involved. Alfred Blue looked kind of good, like on a few runs, but they also didn't have Arian Foster, but they haven't had him for most of the year. Just overall, one of the worst performances I've ever seen.
Danny, a lot of people have been talking about recently with a hindsight issue where no one was necessarily talking about Derek Carr as the number 1 pick 2 years ago, but Houston could have had him if they wanted him. And how much different do you think this team would have been? Because if anybody who watched that game obviously saw Brian Hoyer just throwing picks straight to defenders. There weren't any spectacular plays.
No, there weren't. He's looked good somewhat at certain points of this year, looked bad other points. I did see that his brother David Carr, who's one of the biggest NFL busts in history, tweeted out something to the effect of, man, the Texans really could have had him.
Yeah.
Kind of cryptic that way, but I don't know how much of a difference it would have been. We've all seen how Derek Carr is, and I think we all agree on his potential moving forward. But what does he have for O-line? And he's got DeAndre Hopkins, who's one of the top receivers in the game, but you like to think Derek Carr could do something with a guy like that, considering what he's done for Michael Crabtree and how he made Amari Cooper look this year. But it's really hard to say.
This could be either for either of you guys, because I'll put my stance in it as well. I mean, what are we looking at as the future of the Texans? Because in this league, there isn't that many great quarterbacks. They have a decent enough roster, but there's no way they can go in with Brian Hoyer next year, right? Either of you can answer this.
I can't see them going in with any of the QBs they have on their roster right now. I think they have to either somehow do a trade involving something like Phillip Rivers, maybe. That could be something that comes up in the future, because I don't know if they'll be happy with the Chargers. But other than that, maybe try and get Jared Goff, the guy from Memphis, in the draft, just because you can't go in with Brian Hoyer, BJ or CJ Daniels, and Brandon Weeden. Those are arguably some of the worst. I've never even heard of
CJ Daniels or BJ, whatever. See, you can't even name.
Those are arguably 3 of the worst quarterbacks in the league, and you have all of them. So that's not a good thing to do or have.
Maybe a step up for Matt Schaub, but.
Oh, step up for Matt Schaub. Matt Schaub, what is he? He's the backup with the Ravens, isn't he? Yeah, he's with the Ravens.
Yeah, he's backing up Ryan Mallett, who was part of that Texans tragedy at QB. So that's not saying much.
From the Chiefs side of things, I know they didn't beat up a good team by any measure, but I'd like to give credit to them. I mean, this is their first win, a playoff win in 22 years. They're setting themselves up against a New England team that I think they match up very well against, because the Patriots haven't been healthy recently. And they weren't making any spectacular plays against the Texans, but I like what I see. They're not a flashy team, but they're the kind of grinding team that could surprise you. What do we take away from the Chiefs from this game? Danny.
First, I want to say the last time there was a shutout in the playoffs was 2005. The Panthers beat the Giants 23-0. So it's been 10 years since that happened, so that's saying something. But, they really kind of set the pace coming right out of the game. 11 seconds in, and they had that kickoff return. Alex Smith played decent. Spencer Ware played decent. Travis Kelce was a monster. I mean, he's been solid all year, but he had 67% of all the passing yards that Alex Smith threw that game, which was 128 yards out of like $190, something like that. So he really stepped up and contributed there offensively. Brian Hoyer turned the ball over 5 times, but you also got to give credit to that defense for forcing 5 turnovers. So that's what really kind of not necessarily surprised me, because they've had a solid defense all year, but they were the ones that definitely showed up and basically took that game over. So props to them for that.
Nate?
Yeah, like the Chiefs offense didn't really impress me that much, but they didn't have to. Like they had the Nile Davis kickoff return, like Danny said, and their defense just played lights out, which what I was kind of expecting from them to do against the Texans. But like their offense is kind of set up how the Broncos offense should work. Just basically have a QB who's a game manager, and then they have their defense carry the load, and that's basically what they did against the Texans. Getting 4 interceptions, a kickoff return for a touchdown, you should win every game anytime you have those stats.
Arguably, probably the easiest win in recent memory in Wild Card Weekend. In fact, I believe also setting a theme for this past Wild Card Weekend, the lowest scoring Wild Card Weekend in the NFL since 1984. So it wasn't exactly a barn burner. The Chiefs helped out with that shutout. We're going to get to it in our picks later, but what do the Chiefs, as a quick point, what do the Chiefs need to do to beat the Patriots? Like, give me one quick bullet point that, in your guys' mind. We'll talk about this in the picks later when we actually talk more in depth about the game, about the divisional weekend. But Nate, you can start since you're the Patriots fan.
I'm just gonna go with get to Tom Brady. I think that's going to be their only way. That's their biggest strength on defense, rushing the passer with Justin Houston, Tamba Ali, Derek Johnson, and there's another guy I'm missing too. Dontari Poe. That's who it is.
Dontari Poe, D4. Yeah, they have depth there.
So that's their biggest strength to get into the QB. If they can do that, then the Patriots O-line is already beat up. It's going to have an even tougher problem. But that's, I'd say, their biggest concern, I guess.
Danny?
I was looking at kind of defensive stats earlier, and the running backs, New England's defense is good against the run. They're pretty poor against the pass. So the questionable wide receivers that Kansas City had are really going to need to step up. They have Jeremy Maclin, who's questionable at this point, and if he does play, how strong is he going to play? So that offense needs to be able to put up points somehow. They got some strong running backs in West and Spencer Ware, but like I said, New England's rush defense is good. Kansas City's defense really needs to perform and do everything they can to disrupt Brady, because Brady's not going to roll over like Brian Hoyer did. So they need to put up some points on the board and somehow try and limit that offense that's getting weapons back and has a couple of weeks off. So that'll be their challenge.
My point will be that Alex Smith can't make any of the mistakes he made against the Texans. I believe he threw a pick or two. He can't turn over the ball in my mind once. He's the game manager. He's the efficient guy. I think Farzine, if he was on the show right now, would say the same thing. You can't make any mistakes against the Patriots. You basically have to play a perfect game, which he's capable of. I mean, this is a guy that didn't throw an interception or turn over the ball for over 300 passes, but it's a different animal in the playoffs, and that's something for me to watch on. Let's move over to probably the most controversial game of the weekend, the Steelers and the Bengals. A.J. McCarron in for Andy Dalton. A game that the Steelers were in mostly control of, but there was some tension, there was some heat. The Bengals and Steelers obviously are division rivals. They've had some playoff meetings in the past. They don't like each other. I mean, it's as evident as we saw in this weekend. A lot of physical plays. The NFL, as pointed out by Phil Simms, who is calling this year's Super Bowl. Unfortunately, calling this year's Super Bowl. NFL officials, or the officials of the game, were standing at midfield to prevent any pregame fights, any pregame scuffles, any of that kind of measure, and it looks like that was the right idea because within the context of the game, eventually came back to bite the Bengals. There was a hit that in my mind, might have set the Bengals off. Ryan Shazier's hit on Giovanni Bernard that wasn't called helmet to helmet, even though it was, and the Bengals lost possession. Going down the wire to the game, Adrian McCarron led the comeback. Steelers are driving with the ball after a Ben Roethlisberger injury, but he came back in. Antonio Brown receives a pass from Roethlisberger over the middle, and it was pretty late. Vontaze Burfict lays a helmet-to-helmet hit on Brown. Brown is now in the concussion protocol, and basically all hell broke loose. Adam Jones took exception to Steelers assistant linebacker coach Joey Porter coming on the field to check on Brown, but who knows with Joey Porter, knowing his previous reputation. We won't get into that. And the Bengals basically gifted the win to the Steelers with 30 yards and penalties, and another one-and-done season for the Bengals. We'll talk about the team perspectives, but what do you guys think about that whole endgame situation? Vontaze Burfict and Adam Jones basically losing control. Danny.
I'm not surprised by it, I guess. I mean, like you said, these two teams absolutely hate each other. They've hated each other for a long time. Their fans hate the fans of the other teams. So, they fight like this when there's nothing on the line, let alone when it's continuing on in the playoffs. So tensions were obviously high. I'm not surprised that it happened. I'm not surprised considering Vontaze Burfict's kind of history and what he's liking to do, but it's unfortunate that a guy like Antonio Brown, who could potentially be, the biggest impact player in any game moving forward, including this weekend, might miss it because of some dumb stuff, some fights, and some tensions running high, and basically reasons that are outside the scope of the game. So that's definitely unfortunate, and both teams obviously had some blame, but you hate to see that stuff happen in the playoffs and possibly throw a wrench in the gears for how that game's going to turn out this weekend.
As an update, Ben Roethlisberger has a sprained AC joint and partially torn ligament, I believe, as reported by ESPN, off of a hit off Burfict following that Shazier hit. Antonio Brown is in concussion protocol, and he is questionable for the game. And Vontaze Burfict, a person with a past history, has been suspended for the first 3 games of the 2016 season. Now, Nate, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, the Shazier hit, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was just because the way they collided. Bernard was turning around as Shazier was going in for the tackle. He ducked his head. That, I think, was, if you can call it incidental, like kind of helmet-to-helmet contact, which it's tough to call in the NFL nowadays. But the Burfict hit, you could tell he leaned his shoulder right into like the crown of Antonio Brown and just knocked him out. And then you had Pac-Man Jones after the game going on Instagram saying Antonio Brown deserves to win a Grammy for his acting performance, which was...
You're paraphrasing really nicely. There was a lot more profanity.
Yeah, it was... I could go on and on about it and kind of repeat some of the words he said. I don't know if that would be appropriate. It was definitely a rant for the ages.
He said he would apologize if Brown missed the game, so...
Yeah, that just describes what happened in that little 15-second clip. It's the Bengals, they're a trash, dirty team. Marvin Lewis, that just shows he can't control his players. He doesn't deserve to be there as a coach.
Nice.
It's just overall horrible game.
Nice segue. Does that endgame situation itself mean that Marvin Lewis shouldn't return to Cincinnati in 2016? Because he now has an 0-7 playoff record. I think this game, other than independent of that situation, was more reflective of Andy Dalton not playing. Because I think if Andy Dalton had started, he's been injured since Week 13 with a broken thumb, I think the Steelers honestly blow the Bengals out. And a broken thumb and an injury on the football field isn't by any means the head coach's fault. But what do you guys think about Marvin Lewis going forward in Cincinnati? Nate?
He's had the longest leash in coaching history. I think you see some of these coaches like Hugh Jackson. We'll get to him later. He had 1 year with the Raiders, went 8-8, gone. Who else? Joe Philbin with the Dolphins had a few years, gone. Marvin Lewis has been there since like 2004 or 5. and he hasn't won a playoff. He's been 12 years, so yeah, subtract 12 years from 2016, 2000 something. I don't know. Yeah.
We do math. We do math here.
Yeah, I'm on winter break. I'm not in school mode. I'm not in math mode. Anyways, he's been there 12 years. He's 0-7 in playoff games. I don't care who his quarterback is. He should have won that game. He didn't control his players. They were in a position to win. He doesn't deserve to be there. He's a bad coach.
Danny?
I would basically mimic the same thing. I'm frankly kind of surprised when I heard that when that news came out that he was going to stay in Cincinnati. I was honestly kind of surprised about it. I thought he'd be another name that was tossed around and be taking interviews this week. So
where do they go from here? If they're sticking with Lewis, can we still consider the Bengals a Super Bowl contender or a true playoff contender next year? Because Andy Dalton's going to come back. He's going to be healthy. And this is a team that we've talked about through the season. I mean, they arguably have the best roster in the league. They're coming back with that same roster. How seriously do we take the Bengals in 2016, especially after this kind of implosion that they had? Either of you can take this one.
I think they're going to be a serious contender again. They haven't lost anything. All they're going to do is gain back Andy Dalton. They still got a couple of running backs that are solid, assuming they both stay in town there and don't get traded away or something. They got one of the best young tight ends in the league in Tyler Eifert, who dominated before he got hurt early on in the season, and now he's back and he's showing things again. They got A.J. Green, who's just a beast. Their offense is solid, and their defense is pretty damn good too. So I think they'll be a contender again, but the question will be, will they win in the wild card weekend again next year, or are they going to lose and make Lewis 0-8? So I think they're a weapon for sure. They're a contender, but history shows that they can't seem to win a playoff game.
Nate?
I mean, I guess we can classify him as a contender, but I don't think Andy Dalton's putting up the same season next year as he did this year. I don't think he's going to repeat it. He'll have his good games, but I think he'll come back down to earth a little. The Steelers are going to be much better next year's too, so I think they'll end up taking the division no matter what. But the Bengals are a very good regular season team.
Something to note, you brought it up that Andy Dalton might not be as good next year. Hugh Jackson did get a head coaching position with the Browns. We'll talk about that later on, but that is an offensive coordinator. He's regarded as one of the best offensive minds in the league, and that might hurt Dalton, but we'll have to see how that goes next year. From the Steelers side, they didn't play exactly a fantastic game against the Bengals, in my opinion, by any measure. I don't know what you guys thought, but they came out with a victory. They're clearly the chic pick to come out of the AFC or to make that hot playoff run as that wild card team. What do we make of the Steelers and their victory? And now with their injuries, now with Brown especially in the concussion protocol, and Roethlisberger, I don't know, may or may not be limited. This is a guy that's one of the best at extending the play, working outside the pocket, those kinds of things. What do we think about the Steelers and coming out of this? Nate?
They didn't deserve to win. Just after Big Ben got hurt, their defense let up 16 unanswered points or something along those lines. They let up 16 points in the fourth quarter. I know that. And the Bengals had the game in hand if all they had to do was hold on to the ball. So I don't think the Steelers played well enough to win, especially with their two backup running backs, Todman and Toussaint. Antonio Brown obviously got hurt, but it was. I honestly don't know what to make of it. I didn't think they were going to win no matter what, but it is what it is. It was very, very entertaining. I was happy to see Big Ben come back out. He's kind of like a WWE wrestler, like Paul Pierce with a wheelchair. Gets hurt, comes back, on the bench. Landry Jones throws a pick. He comes back in, leads the comeback.
It was like a Hollywood narrative in itself.
Yeah, it was definitely the more entertaining game to watch, just with all the different side stories. But for the Steelers, they had their nice little win, even though they didn't really deserve it, and they'll most likely lose next week.
What was the name of that second Steelers running back? Todman? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Jordan Todman. He's actually.
I saw you tweeting about him during the game that he's going to get paid. Do you know him or something? Do you have some kind of connection?
Yeah, he's actually from my hometown. His stepdad coached me in football back in the old days. So
you're personal friends with him. You see Todman all the time.
Well, he's not anymore. I mean, he lives in Pittsburgh. He lived in Minnesota, Jacksonville, some other place. I think Carolina. So Like if I see him, I'll say hi. But other than that, it's like nothing serious.
He can't like swing playoff tickets or anything like that.
No, like if anything, if this is like the top of the list, I'm just off the screen down. I don't even know if I'm on the list. I'd have to like print out my own list and just hand it to him and see if he like recognizes
Hey, do you
it.
remember me? You played Little League ball with me. Remember
I
me?
think this is where I should be on your list.
Yeah.
Danny, your thoughts on the Steelers?
They're just they're beat up bad right now, and you know they without all these star players that they have, and with these banged up players that they have, they only put up what 16 points, and Cincinnati
18
was
points.
stalling. Cincinnati was stalling every drive they had. They didn't have any issues. They were settling for field goals. So while it kind of appeared that they were quote unquote dominating the game, they were only up by 2 scores, and so it didn't take much for Cincinnati to storm back in the fourth quarter and make it a close game. So, and that was with Antonio Brown, and Roethlisberger was limping around obviously in the fourth quarter and hurt, but and now they're probably going to be out. Brown would be my guess, and we'll see what kind of Big Ben comes out. But so they're shorter weapons than they were last week, so it's going to be a tough game for them.
All right, well, let's continue along the same lines as we did with the first wild card game. I have to agree. Like as I said, the Steelers didn't play the best game, but Pittsburgh's biggest concern, or one big thing that they have to worry about or work with against Denver on Saturday, no, on Sunday afternoon. Danny.
Oh man, that defense. I mean, Denver's defense is the tops in the league, and they played one that wasn't half as good. So if they can, although in Week 15 they did kind of tear apart, they beat the Broncos, and Antonio Brown had a monster game, a couple hundred yards and a couple of scores, and damn near set a record for receptions in the week. But without him in the game, possibly, and they're just going to have to try and basically have the same game plan they had going into Week 15 and try and take advantage of those same matchups if they can. They have other mega talents at wide receivers in Wheaton and Martavis Bryant, so if they can use that game plan with those guys, if Brown is in fact out, they need to kind of try to just exploit the right matchups and do the same sort of thing. It's going to be difficult, especially with a questionable D'Angelo Williams and Nate's buddy at running back possibly, but it's going to be a challenge for sure against that defense, especially.
Nate?
Yeah, for the Steelers, I feel like their biggest thing is just to get healthy, which is tough to do in a short week. Is it? No, they have the next.
No, they have Sunday.
Yeah. So I was thinking Saturday, but because like Danny said, they played very well against the Broncos Week 15. If Big Ben can somehow will himself to another playoff game, somehow pull another fourth quarter, maybe throw the ball farther than 10 yards. Antonio Brown can remember like some of the plays after being concussed. D'Angelo Williams can play. I think a healthy Steelers will put up a fight, but the Broncos defense, it will just be too much.
Don't spoil it yet. We're not at that point.
I never finished my sentence, though. That's like a cliffhanger. You just got to move on to the next chapter.
That's assuming this is moving on to the next chapter. We have an author.
Yeah.
That's assuming Peyton Manning can throw the ball 10 yards downfield, but we'll get to that. Moving on to probably the most heartbreaking or unshocking moment of the weekend, well, at least for Minnesota fans. Another chapter in their Cleveland-esque sports lore. Basically, the Seahawks and the Vikings on NBC, Minnesota played the perfect game plan. Everyone expected a blowout by Seattle, and Minnesota stayed in the game the whole time, arguably controlled the entire game. Seattle makes their own fourth quarter rally off a few great plays from Russell Wilson working outside of the pocket. Teddy Bridgewater drives down the field, sets up Blair Walsh, the Minnesota Vikings kicker, up for a chip shot 27-yard field goal. Bang, bang, boom, Minnesota on to Arizona. And I can't remember the name of the holder, but as everybody wanted to eloquently point out from the classic Ace Ventura, laces were not out. Laces were not out, and Blair Walsh missed the chip shot field goal. And we have another Gary Anderson instance. Guys, I don't even know where to begin on here. Is this loss, or is this more about the Vikings or Blair Walsh missing it? Who's to blame here for the Vikings loss? Because I have a hard time blaming a kicker who made 3 field goals in sub-zero temperatures, and then he just happened to miss the last one because his holder didn't put the laces out.
Oh, I fully agree there. I mean, I don't think he's looking for an excuse or anybody to blame. I don't think he minds the laces being in. In all honesty, it sounded like
Ray Finkel did. Ray Finkel did. All right.
He did, but Blair Walsh didn't care. I don't think. But I think everybody else is. I mean, that offense put up 183 total yards. Granted, it was -5 degrees or whatever it was outside, but they put up 183 yards. The defense did their job. They held one of the hottest teams in football to 226 total yards and only 10 points. So they did their job, but Bridgewater in that offense, I mean, Adrian Peterson averaged 2 yards a carry in this game. So I think that offensive line is probably held a lot more to blame than their field goal kicker, who made 3 out of 4 and had virtually their only points in the whole game. So I think that offense is a lot more to blame than anybody else.
Nate?
But I'm putting the blame on Blair Walsh. I understand he had 9 points. Yeah, 9 points. Yeah. My math is still all messed up after the first time I tried doing math on this.
It's Christmas break. We get it. It's Christmas break.
Yeah. But, like, it's the laces. He kicked, I think, 1 or 2 field goals, too, with the laces facing him, and he made them both. So that's not even close to an excuse. A 27-yard field goal from the left hash, you have to make that anytime, especially in the playoffs. That's what kickers are there for, to carry the team when the offense goes bad. The offense drove down, put him in the situation to win. May have not have been the best clock management by Mike Zimmer and the staff. They had, I think, it was like 50 seconds left, even if he did make it. They could have ran a few more plays. I think they had a timeout or two, maybe centered the ball in, so then it would be an easier kick. But Blair Walsh has to make that. You're a professional kicker. You're signed to make kicks like that in clutch performances, clutch time, and he just flat out missed it.
I find it fascinating that you guys didn't want to blame Adrian Peterson. I mean, this is the guy that led the league in rushing. I know he's going against the league's best rushing defense, but he's your best guys to show up better than less than 60 yards and less than 2 yards a carry, and also fumbling the ball on maybe the second biggest mistake of the game for the Vikings, giving Seattle a free field goal and giving them the lead. Peterson's your best player. Peterson, obviously, he's had I'm not going to say a rough past year because it was all really self-inflicted, but he's that franchise. I mean, he's 30 years old, and I just wonder at some point if Minnesota, they should really transition more to Bridgewater being the focal point of the offense. We've talked about it before, but they can't because the offensive line isn't good enough in pass protection. So if you're going to rely on Peterson to do that, I have to put the game on him. I mean, he has to come through big. I don't care what the competition is. If it's best versus best, and he hasn't had the best playoff history, so it sort of showed there. That's my stance on it. Let's move over to the Seattle perspective. How did they escape? I mean, they played a pretty bad game. The defense made Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Cam Chancellor, Michael Bennett even. Everybody looked like they were in Super Bowl 48 form, but the offense struggled, and I think they, much like the Steelers, Seattle got lucky. How did Seattle escape? Nate?
They escaped on the right foot of Blair Walsh. Like, they were playing with...
It was literally only that? Okay.
Yeah, I think they're playing with house money from this point on. I don't think they deserve to win that game at all. Their offense was flat. Their defense was playing phenomenal. Held the Vikings to 9 points, which is great, but their offense only scored 10 points, which is horrible. And their offense, like Danny mentioned earlier, is the hottest in the league right now. Russell Wilson's throwing like 5 touchdowns a game. Who's their running back now? I don't even know.
It was Christine Michael, but Marshawn Lynch is expected to return.
Yeah, so they'll get Marshawn Lynch back now. But from this point on, they shouldn't be in the playoffs, but they're playing with house money. That's just how I feel about them. I don't like the Seahawks.
I think that defense is just overwhelming. I mean, 183 yards total by Minnesota. Their defense certainly did their job. The offense didn't do much, but then again, it was -5 degrees, and you knew it was going to be a low-scoring, low-production type of game coming in just because of the conditions. But the defense certainly did their job in those same conditions, and they did what they needed to, which pains me to say as a 49er fan, but they somehow squeaked one out and ultimately got super damn lucky. So I mean, I almost have to mirror Nate's sentiment on they shouldn't be in the playoffs anymore, and they are based on that foot. So
Is it karma? Well, this isn't a serious question by any means, but is it karma for the Malcolm Butler play in the Super Bowl?
it could be. That's pretty funny.
But Nate, I'm sure, wouldn't agree with that. But I mean, that might have been a little payback for them. Might have been like a nice little retribution, blowing Super Bowl by 1 yard. So might as well get gifted divisional berth. Guys, biggest concern. Obviously, Russell Wilson didn't play his best game either. I think that's something we have to keep an eye out against Carolina. Biggest concern or challenge or whatever, the same kind of thing we did for the first 2 games for Seattle against the number 1 seed in the NFC. Saturday afternoon. Either of you can take this. Whoever wants to first.
Danny, you go first. I got to think on this one.
You know, as good as the Panthers' defense seemingly is, they are somewhat in the middle of the pack statistically all year long. They rank just inside the top half statistically on that defense. So it is possible to put up points against them. We've seen it a few times this year. Seattle really needs to bounce back offensively and get back into the form they've been in for the last 7 or 8 weeks prior to this week. If that happens, it's going to be it could potentially be a super high scoring game with 2 of the best looking teams in the NFL going against each other. Russell Wilson and company just need to bounce back and continue where they had been. Plus they get Marshawn Lynch back, so that'll certainly be a help.
Is Seattle the worst possible matchup for Carolina out of the whole NFC field, or are we still looking at Arizona, Danny?
Oh man, Seattle is playing.
Because we saw Derek being concerned that they would that they'd have to play Seattle in the divisional round, and he was tweeting about that. So that's just why the only reason why I posed that.
I think it is. I think Seattle's playing about as good a football as anybody in the NFL right now, with the exception of this last week. I think that's probably the toughest matchup that Carolina could have gotten this week.
All right, fair enough. Nate, now that you've had time to simmer over there.
Yeah, I would say basically for the Seahawks, if they want to win, make Cam Newton beat you through the air. I know he's had a phenomenal season all year passing the ball, but it's only a matter of time till like the clock strikes midnight on those receivers.
Really? Oh, on the receivers.
Yeah,
okay.
on those, yeah, like Greg Olsen, he'll still, depending on how Cam Chancellor plays him, he'll still get his catches and yards. But Ted Ginn, Jericho Cotchery, all those guys, it's only a matter of time till they just go back to who they actually are. Because Cam Newton, he's had an MVP season playing with them, but I mean, you've seen it throughout the year. Ted Ginn's had his big drops. Jericho Cotchery has shown that he's not a number 2 receiver. He's actually like a 3 or 4. And I think in the playoffs against the Seahawks secondary, which is the best of the league right now with Arizona missing Tyrann Mathieu, I think they'll be able to expose that.
I think for me to watch will be basically, in my mind, these 2 teams mirror each other. I mean, you have a mobile playmaking quarterback that can extend plays and work from the pocket, Russell Wilson and Cam Newton. You have they're okay offensive lines, not really any explosive receivers, and a dominant defense. Which team plays the style better? Which quarterback plays better in my mind? That's a cliche, NFL cliche. Which quarterback plays better with their limited supporting cast? Something to keep in mind, Carolina does have Charles Tillman injured. That was their nickel corner, I believe, starting corner, and they have had their secondary issues. As Danny noted, that's why their defense hasn't been as great as normal. But which team plays that physical defense with a mobile quarterback style better? It's as simple as that for me. Finally, let's move to our final wild card weekend before we get into other discussions around the league. The Packers and the Redskins. I'm not going to say anybody was shocked that Green Bay basically dominated that game after an 11-0 start by the Redskins, but it was jarring to see the Aaron Rodgers of old return in such a fashion. Was this more about the Redskins being an inferior team and Rodgers just taking advantage of them because he wasn't pressured much, or are the Packers the team now to fear in the NFC or something to watch as they head to Arizona Saturday night? Danny.
Green Bay has one of the top 3rd ranking rush defense, and basically I mean, Kirk Cousins had statistically the best game of all the quarterbacks that played in Wild Card Weekend, but they could not get their running game going at all. They ran for 84 total yards on the ground, and some of those were even by Cousins himself. They didn't do much on the ground, so although Kirk Cousins threw for 320 some yards, that was the only weapon they had going, and so whatever defense Green Bay had to perform, they did, and certainly Aaron Rodgers stepped up and said, hey, I need to take this game over. Yeah, they had Lacey and Starks did pretty well. They had 115 or 120 yards between the two of them. Rodgers played well enough. They had a couple of short field drives where they only had to go 40 or 50 yards. But then again, they had 3, I think, 80-yard drives. So it was really kind of different to see Rodgers step up and actually be Rodgers, I guess. So I don't know. They played well, but we'll see what they can do here this upcoming week against Arizona.
The thing to note, too, is that Deshaun Jackson has not yet learned how to cross the goal line. We've had several examples of this. Maybe he'll finally learn, and then maybe the Redskins will win a playoff game.
Was it
Not sure about it.
Buck doing that game?
What was that?
Was Joe Buck the one doing that game?
Joe Buck was the one doing that game, yeah.
And he said he made the comment about how Deshaun Jackson usually has a nose for the end zone.
Yeah, and then I saw the NC, or rather Nate did it because he runs the account. The 4 pictures of every famous example of him dropping the ball. Obviously, there was that Monday night game where he was with the Eagles. Deshaun Jackson, he's a deep threat, but he doesn't understand. I don't think he understands the concept of the pylon. That's something to keep an eye on. Nate, was this more about the Packers or Redskins and their star non-goal line receiver?
To me, I wasn't expecting the Redskins to win the game, but when they came out and they should have had a quick 9 points, but Deshaun Jackson decided to just keep the ball behind him the whole time. That would have changed the game because allowing the Packers to get you a goal line stop, well, to stop you on the goal line, I mean, and then only hold you to 3 points. I mean, after Aaron Rodgers just had the safety on the previous drive, that's big for defense for the rest of the game. They have that confidence going. That's just going to keep building up. They're going up against a young QB like Kirk Cousins, even though he threw for like 330 yards and touchdown. And that's just going to give them more confidence to dominate the game. Aaron Rodgers, you can say he was back. I'm still not going to be sold on them this week, especially because Devontae Adams is out now. And that's going to be even tougher, only having basically Cobb, James Jones, and Richard Rodgers to throw to because their running game has been very inconsistent all year too, going up against that tough Cardinals defense.
It might just be less passes that get dropped with Adams out.
Adams had a good game. I believe he had a few nice catches. So
he had a touchdown.
He wouldn't appreciate that if he was listening right now, Danny. Okay, he doesn't deserve your shade.
You're right.
Do the Redskins have their quarterback of the future before we talk about what the Packers need to be concerned about with Arizona? Have they found Kirk Cousins? Is he the guy moving forward? Something to keep in mind: they didn't beat any teams with a winning record. In fact, the best team they played within their stretch where he was hot in the second half of the season was my Chicago Bears. But the Chicago Bears aren't exactly a talented defense that he lit up. So where are we on with Kirk Cousins in 2016 and what the Redskins can build off of this, I guess, surprising NFC East title? No one expected them to come out of that division. Danny.
I think he could be. I don't know that he's definitely their guy going forward, but there's a lot more average or a lot worse quarterbacks that teams build their team around, so to speak. I mean, the quarterback, although he gets all the fame and everything else, he doesn't necessarily have to be the best player on the team. Look at a team like the Chiefs right now. Is Alex Smith a franchise quarterback? Has he ever been in a discussion for being even a great quarterback, let alone a good one? I mean, you don't need the type of quarterback. You don't need a Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and Andrew Luck, not this year, but in previous years, to build your team around. So could he be their franchise quarterback? Yeah. I mean, he's probably not going to have his name tossed around in the Tom Brady, Peyton Manning realm, but I think if they put some weapons around him, they could certainly excel with him in that position.
Nate, you were shaking your head. Spit hot fire at Kirk Cousins. Let's go.
I honestly think he's this year's Nick Foles.
This year's Nick Foles.
Yeah,
Explain that.
The Nick Foles that everyone thought was an outstanding QB for the Eagles 2 years ago, and now he's not even. I don't even think he'll be playing for the Rams next year unless they don't find another QB. But Kirk Cousins had a nice little year, played in the worst division in football history, arguably. Went 9-7 on like a decent roster. They can keep him around, but next year I don't think they're going to do anything with him. Tony Romo is back healthy. The Eagles maybe will find someone who like realizes DeMarco Murray's on their team. The Giants get a new start at coach. Odell Beckham's only going to get better. Kirk Cousins, he'll have probably this same season, but it won't get this much hype because they'll be the worst team in the NFC East. And
So
then,
you guys, go ahead.
And then like Washington Redskins fans will realize that they don't like that, and then they'll just ship him out of town.
So RG3 can't take the mantle and take the Redskins to the Super Bowl? That can't happen?
RG3's gone.
Yeah,
I'm kidding. I'm clearly kidding. He left a cryptic, egotistical message in the locker room and unpacked everything. So RG3, I guess we're rooting for you, buddy, but you got to get it together. Biggest thing for the Packers. Looking forward to Arizona, who's in my mind the most complete remaining team in the playoff field. Their one big thing, Nate.
Find something to expose in Arizona. I don't know what it is yet. I'm sure as the game goes on, they'll figure it out. But right now, I just don't see the Packers standing a chance, especially after seeing what the Cardinals did to them earlier in the year. Like, losing Tyrann Mathieu for the Cardinals is huge, but I think they'll be able to overcome that and easily beat the Packers. But if I had to choose something, have Aaron Rodgers play better.
Play better? If he could?
That only way they'll win is if Aaron Rodgers has one of those games where he just throws for like 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, but I don't think that's going to happen. I can't even convince myself that it's going to happen.
Danny?
Those running backs have looked pretty good in Green Bay, but Arizona also has one of the top overall defenses in the league. The one weak point, if you will, if you could call it one, is against the tight ends. So I think Aaron Rodgers needs to duplicate what he did last week, and at least part of last week, the second half of it, and Richard Rodgers needs to have a big game and come with his A game. That'll be the biggest thing for the Packers offense to do. Their defense is questionable. It's good in some areas, bad in others. So you're playing against a MVP candidate with some very solid receivers and one of the great young running backs of the year. So if you need to, I don't know if you can stop them offensively, but if you can't, you certainly need to step up, and the Rodgers to Rodgers connection needs to be really strong this weekend if they want to have a chance.
See, now I'm going to take probably something you guys, again, neglected to mention. The Packers, they really have the only thing they can do to beat the Cardinals, because, as I said, the most complete remaining team in my mind, I'm not sure if you guys agree or disagree with that, is Arizona. Quick question. Is Arizona the best remaining team in the playoff field? Quick yes or no?
Arguably.
Arguably. Okay, Patriots fan. Danny, unbiased perspective?
Yes.
Okay. The only way the Packers can pull off the upset in the desert is hiring Jim Bob Cooter to create the most amazing offensive and defensive game plan ever. In fact, if they could fire Mike McCarthy and hire Jim Bob Cooter, that's the only thing that's going to happen. But see, that can't happen because he's currently under contract with the Lions, and he's not going to help the Packers. I'm spoiling my pick. I really don't care, but I don't see a shot here.
I already spoiled my pick.
You already spoiled your Denver pick, you two, and your Cardinals pick, so it's fine. But we'll get to that later on. Danny, what was that?
I said amateurs.
Amateurs? No, we're working professionals. We're trying to build ourselves, Danny. You don't throwing shade unnecessarily.
I haven't been here for a while. I'm like new to this. This is new to me. This whole year.
Yeah, Nate's rusty. He hasn't been around a while, and you're gonna tell him that. Come on, Danny. Show some class, man.
I'm sorry. That was a very Vontez perfect move of me. I apologize, guys.
I'm about to Adam Pac-Man the shit out of you.
And Nate's now in the concussion protocol of podcasting. Thank you very much. Let's move on. After that crazy wildcard weekend, let's move on to some other not quick tidbits, because obviously there was a big day yesterday. And it has been a big weekend so far in the coaching ranks Adam Gase hired by the Miami Dolphins. Tom Coughlin in the rumor mill for the Eagles, for the 49ers. Hugh Jackson, the offensive coordinator, as I mentioned earlier, for the Bengals, was hired by the Browns. Maybe the worst match possible, even though because Jackson's a genius. What's he doing in Cleveland? What sticks out to you guys so far from this from the coaching carousel of a big hire, or for somebody that hasn't been hired yet, or for somebody that should have been fired? What's something to note as this? I mean, because we're still in the early goings of it in mid-January. Danny.
The interesting thing to me will be some of the Tom Coughlin, to see if he gets another job. He's the oldest coach in the NFL. Well, that was in the NFL.
Pete Carroll now holds that title.
Does he really?
Yeah, he's 67 or 66. But anyway, continue.
He looks like he could be somebody's grandma, but
he looks like he does. He looks like he does yoga at like 4 a.m. and he's like the guy that like eats like power bars and he probably works out with J.J. Watt. Like, that's how he stays that young. But anyway,
he still looks like a grandma.
But, yeah. Continue.
So to see if a guy like Tom Coughlin gets another job, and then another interesting thing will be to see if some of these previously retired coaches come out of retirement. There's been names tossed around that we've talked about before. Mike Shanahan, Mike Holmgren, guys like that whose names have been bounced around a little bit, to see if some of those guys get back into the game. So that'll be interesting to see here in the coming weeks. Is
it worth it to hire one of those retreads? Because as we've seen in the recent memory, it hasn't really worked out well. I mean, Mike Shanahan had a one playoff berth with the Redskins, and he's the one that basically ruined RG3's career. Mike Holmgren hasn't been relevant since 2007 in Seattle, or 2008 in Seattle. So, I mean, is it worth it on these retreads, Danny?
I don't think so. I mean, even if they do come out and have a good year or two, how long are they going to be there? I mean, they could maybe, if there's a young, strong coordinator that they could pass the reins off to or something like that. But it's basically just a patch, right? If they do something like that, it'd be interesting to see, though. I mean, those guys at least have some credibility to their names, more so than some of the other coaches that are currently on NFL rosters. More credibility than a Jim Tomsula who's looking for another job. So
more credibility than the Yorks themselves. Nate, what do you think about this coaching carousel so far?
The biggest surprise, I mentioned it earlier, was Marvin Lewis just still somehow coaching the Bengals. That I've already gone through that. He just doesn't deserve to be there. He's just a bad coach if you want to look at playoff record. Great regular season coach, I'll give him that. But something very interesting, I don't think that will happen. I would love to see Nick Saban go to the Buccaneers. I saw something I either mentioned on like Fox Sports or ESPN today that it was somehow possible if they offered him enough money or whatever, but I don't think he'll leave Alabama. But I'd love to see him and famous Jameis go together, maybe win a couple Super Bowls down south, have some fun with it. I got nothing else to say about all the other coaches because I honestly don't know half the people.
What about Adam Gase being the new Josh McDaniels? Any thoughts on that?
I know. All I know about him.
Coming after your title? Coming after the belt?
It's going to be tough for them to do that with Ryan Tannehill. I know Adam Gase is supposed to be like some QB genius, but Ryan Tannehill is not a good QB.
He made Jay Cutler a good quarter. Well, Jay Cutler is better than Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, Ryan Tannehill is one of he's one of the worst quarterbacks. I'll throw that out there. But Adam Gase, I don't know much about. Wasn't this only like his first year in Chicago?
This was his first year in Chicago, yes.
And I don't know where he was before.
He was with the Broncos before that.
No, yeah. So he had an HGH Peyton Manning, and then a research Jay Cutler. So now with Ryan Tannehill, they're gonna go 5-11.
Oh man.
All right. Well, the thing. I think the thing to know with me that I mentioned it before introducing Hugh Jackson. Why are you going to Cleveland? I mean, that's the most unstable franchise in the league. In my mind, the best offensive mind in the league. This is a guy that's turned Andy Dalton MVP candidate. This is a guy that had Carson Palmer relevant for a while in Oakland. I mean, he's by any measure a very respected guy and a good leader who's been waiting in the wings for a while to be a head coach. Why do you pick your first opportunity to be in Cleveland and put yourself in position to be the next Joe Philbin, as Nate said, or be another, just be fired within a few seasons? Why not go somewhere else that has at least a competent that maybe not, they don't have a foundation built either, but they have competent management and they have a competent owner and they have a competent front office. I think it was a mismatch made in hell basically for Hugh Jackson to go to Cleveland, and I'm shocked. What was that, Nate?
How long did Hugh Jackman? How long was he in Cincinnati?
Hugh Jackman is Wolverine.
No, Hugh Jackson. Hugh Jackson.
Hugh Jackson was in Cincinnati. I think he's been in Cincinnati for about the past 3 or 4 years. I think he
Oakland before that, wasn't he?
So
he was in Oakland as head coach for a year. Yes.
So he was kind of around when Andy Dalton first got there, right?
Yeah.
How long has Andy Dalton been in the league? I feel like
Andy
he's
Dalton's
been
been in
around
the league
forever.
since 2011, if I'm not mistaken. That's something I have to fact check. Hold on. But anyway, what's your thoughts on what are you saying? What are you trying to say?
Because I think it kind of makes sense that Hugh Jackson, not Jackman, gets like a shot.
Yeah, Wolverine.
Yeah, Wolverine gets to come in, tear down the city of Cleveland, rip apart the ownership, and then draft his own quarterback and build it up from there. Like Jared Goff, I mentioned it earlier, the guy from Memphis, Paxton Lynch, I think his name is.
Yeah.
I think that's the only thing I can see that makes sense because he had interviews with like 49ers and the Giants, and Odell Beckham and Eli Manning's a pretty good tandem. But I guess he's a big fan of Johnny Foosball.
I don't necessarily agree with what some people are saying. Johnny Football probably is over in Cleveland, but do you guys think that Hugh Jackson could make anything out of him, even despite all his off-the-field issues? Danny?
No.
Okay.
Well, Wolverine can't, but can Hugh Jackson do it?
I don't think so. I'm just not a Johnny Manziel fan, though, so I've disliked him since he was at A&M, so I'm probably a bad guy to ask that question to.
I'm a huge Johnny Football guy. He's not a good NFL quarterback, but if Hugh Jackson comes to town, Johnny Football's gonna be slinging the ball like Uncle Rico. You know what I mean? Over the mountains.
And this was Andy Dalton's 4th season. He came out of the draft in 2011, so I think Hugh Jackson's been with him for the most part, helping him develop.
Yeah, so to come back down to earth, I think that makes sense then, kind of. But granted, the Browns are one of the worst organizations just in the history of everything.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much power they give Jackson, how much leeway they give him to rebuild. But again, as I said, I'm not a fan of the hire, and listening to you guys, I don't think you guys necessarily are either. Well, Danny hates Johnny Manziel by any measure.
Well, he said that his 2 choices, it was only going to be the Browns or the Niners. And out of that decision, he made.
I would have just stayed in Cincinnati at that point.
True, but he made the right decision between those 2 teams because the 49ers front office is absolute garbage.
That speaks volumes that they're worse than even Cleveland. But yeah, continue.
It's crazy over there, man. Who would want to work for that organization at this point in time? Is what those guys are trying to do. But so out of those 2 options, he made the right choice. But why are those the only 2 options? Like you said, he's probably one of the most respected offensive minds, one of the better, highly pursued offensive coordinators in the NFL right now that was possibly available. So to narrow it down to those 2 options to me just seems asinine, but whatever.
Well, Hugh Jackson ruined his career, and in a nice segue, St. Louis football is forever ruined and gone. The Los Angeles Rams are back, guys, and possibly even the Los Angeles Chargers or Raiders in the future. Yesterday, the NFL, in a lengthy live tweet from every single NFL reporter that blew up my timeline, and I kind of wanted to delete my Twitter yesterday, Jason Lockenfora, looking at you, it was decided in a lengthy vote, 30-2, that the NFL Los Angeles football is back, that the Rams would be effectively starting there next year. They're building a stadium in Inglewood, California. But the Rams will be playing in the Coliseum, USC's Coliseum, until that point, starting next season. The Chargers and the Raiders have an option to join later. The Chargers must make a decision by March, so basically extorting money out of San Diego to build a stadium for them, while the Raiders are possibly leaning more towards staying in Oakland. And another thing to note before I turn this over to you guys, Mike Brown was one of the only ones to vote against the Rams moving to LA, and this wasn't because he cared about St. Louis and their fans. This is because Deadspin, or I believe ESPN made a report that he didn't want the Rams to move over to LA because he sees it as a sign of expansion to where he wouldn't have to, and extension of the salary cap to where he wouldn't have to spend more money on players and winning and building this franchise. In case you guys don't know, that is the owner of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Hugh Jackson may have gotten lucky, but then again, he's in Cleveland. I mean, crazy situation. Obviously, the Rams are back. First time there's been football in Los Angeles since 2000 or the 1994. Danny, your thoughts on their return?
I'm not surprised by it. They've been talking about it for years, wanting a team back in LA. One of the things that's kind of, I think, going to be bad for the organization is that it seems to me like LA is not going to have quite the fan base as a team like St. Louis, where it just seems to me that they had a lot bigger following there, and maybe they'll have trouble selling out stadiums and stuff like that. They probably won't the first few years, I'm sure, but unless they show up there and just make an immediate impact and on the NFC West and start tearing up the division, I think they might have trouble filling up that stadium year after year. That's why they left in the first place, you know what I mean? On the other hand, it was really annoying to see all the St. Louis Rams fans talking about how they hate the Rams now and this is the Seattle Supersonics type of situation and just angry about it. It's like, man, the Rams were in LA for 50 years prior to coming to St. Louis. And now they're leaving after 20 years, and it's like, you know, old timers couldn't have been fans for more than 20 years, and the younger kids, that's all they know, right? But they were in LA a hell of a lot longer than they were ever in St. Louis. So that was really annoying to me.
Nate?
Yeah, I would just like to say congratulations to LA for getting a franchise. Like, no one's gonna care about it, and after I'm done with the sentence, because they have they have 15 other teams. I feel like the Lakers and Clippers are kings of the town. The Kings are good at hockey still. I don't know.
They're good.
Are they good? Yeah, they're really good. The Rams, and if they get another football team, the Chargers or Raiders, it's way too much going on in LA.
As well as USC. USC probably comes first.
Yeah, they have USC, UCLA. There's just so much going on in LA, and there's so many people that live in LA that are from different parts of the country. It's not even going to matter. All the people that live in LA now are already fans of different teams. They're not just going to go in and adapt the Rams right away. Or unless it's like the old timers like Danny's talking about, but they probably are huge fans of like the Cowboys now.
Do we even call LA a sports town? And if we did, I mean, are they a basketball town, or are they just more about like possessing things?
They're definitely a Laker town still, no matter what. Like, you can't take the Lakers out of LA, I guess, for like sports king, no matter how bad they are now. But just overall, in general, to have that many teams in one city, like you look at New York, they have so many teams, and it's just, I feel like it doesn't work out. There's always a few teams that get left behind. The Brooklyn Nets are one of them, and I feel like the Islanders maybe. Those are the teams, and both LA football teams are going to be those teams of LA right now.
And they got a lot going on. They got Hollywood there. They got a lot of vegans that are worried about stuff like that. So there's a lot going on outside of a new football team in LA that people have to worry about, I guess.
What are your guys' thoughts? Because this has been a reported thing on the NFL basically extorting these cities to build new stadiums and to have taxpayers either pay in or lose their sports teams. Owners have done this before. Nate mentioned Danny, you mentioned it. The Sonics leaving Seattle. That was an extortion, hostage situation for that basketball team. Now the Thunder. Cleveland did it when they moved, or rather, the Baltimore Colts, moving to the Ravens, Art Modell, all that fancy stuff, losing the Browns. What do you guys? Is this? Owners aren't going to stop doing this, but it's obviously against ethics. What are you guys' thoughts on this?
it's just all about money. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day. If the owners think they can make as much money in LA or more money than they were in St. Louis, San Diego, and Oakland, then they're going to do it. They don't care about the taxpayers at all because we're still going to watch the games. People in St. Louis are going to be mad right now, and then a week's going to go by, and they're going to be turning into the next playoff games. They're going to jump on different team bandwagons. I already know the Colts sent out a tweet to like people of St. Louis saying like they're 4 miles away, come to Lucas Oil Stadium, but I don't think anyone wants to do that. But like that's just how the NFL is. They're going to adapt, make money, adapt, move, make money, find Tom Brady, adapt, make money, move, continue. Yeah.
It's such a big money maker for the city, but it's going to be, I mean, it's crazy because you're basically taking a private business, or at least the NFL is a company, I guess, and you're combining it with the government and forcing people that a lot of them don't care about sports or care about a team or anything, and they're all of a sudden they have an extra tax that's going to the stadium, which in turn it'll, in theory improve their economy and all this and that, and so that's the idea behind it. But it's kind of crazy to throw however much it costs to build a stadium, close to $1 billion, for a stadium that's capable of holding a new NFL franchise in LA, of course. But so it's really kind of a shady game that you've seen happen over and over again. But lots of fans are diehard, and they were in full support of it, and so it kind of is what it is. I don't know if it'll ever change. It's going to continue to happen elsewhere. And
well, put yourself. I want you guys to put yourselves in this perspective. Okay, so say, Danny, we'll go with you second since you're not in proximity, say, to the Niners, but I have to think of a team for you. Okay, but Nate, if the Patriots moved, how angry would you be? What kinds of emotions would come out? Like, who would you blame? I mean, I know you've had your Deflategate issues and your whole tweeting thing, but I mean, how would you feel, honestly, if the Patriots moved to, say, Fargo, North Dakota, or something?
I don't think University of North Dakota would like that.
Well, no, I'm just spitballing some kind of random thing. No. Who wants to move to Oklahoma? But the Sonics did that, So how would you feel if the Patriots moved from Boston? I mean, you have to take that fan perspective because there were some fans that cared about the Rams, and there are some fans that care about the Chargers or the Raiders if they move to LA too, even through this extortion process.
I'd probably be very angry about it. Just because I love the Patriots. I don't go to as many games just because the ticket prices are absurd at Gillette. So that may be a benefit. Like I could make like a whole like trip out of it in the future. Like, oh, let's go to North Dakota and watch some Patriots football. Like I guess I could somehow spin it into like a positive. But it would definitely the first like month or even like the first season, I'd be mad about it. But I'm sure I'd still root for the team.
You still root for the Patriots?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't know what other team I'd want to root for. I wouldn't jump on the Jets bandwagon. Maybe the Bills. The Bills is very enticing, especially now that they have Rob Ryan too. That's a very enticing team. But
Fox's next sitcom, Brothers on the Sideline or something. That's going to fail within one season. But
just like, looking at all the other teams, like I've grown up to love the Patriots, hate every other team in the world. So I'm gonna still ride out with them. I still would trust Robert Kraft, Jonathan Kraft, the whole organization.
Well, you would trust them even though they take away your team? You would trust them even though they moved your team?
Yeah, I'd still be a fan of them. It's not like, yeah, if it's like I'm someone I can like decipher between like business moves and like just like complete jerk moves, and if moving to Fargo, North Dakota is a smart move,
that is a random city, man. But
yeah, but all right, so we'll say like, moving to like Orlando, Florida. If that's a smart move for them, if they want to go down there, have at it. That just makes my trip even better. Instead of going to North Dakota, now I can go to Disney.
I think the four rings are getting into your head, man. I didn't expect that. I think the four rings are getting in your head.
No, that's just how I look at it.
No, fair enough. I know.
Would you be mad if the Bears left Chicago?
Absolutely. I would throw a fit, and I wouldn't be a Bears fan anymore.
What team would you go for then? Because you wouldn't just go in the NFL as just an NFL fan.
I would be a neutral fan. I would be disillusioned by the Bears. I already don't trust George McCaskey enough anyway. So why would I like the Bears after they left the city and I can't go to games anymore and they're local blackouts and stuff like that? Why would I still be a fan? For me, I can't do that. Like there's a different emotional investment. in my mind, I think being part of a fan sometimes, I think Daniel disagrees with this because he's a Niners fan that lives in Nebraska, but close proximity does play a part by some kind of measure. It's different, too, because then you won't be able to watch the games anymore because the NFL does have those kinds of blackout issues and viewing maps, but I don't know. It's a different perspective. Danny, okay, so you're a Niners fan, right?
Yep.
You're an alumnus of Nebraska, so you're obviously a huge Nebraska fan, everything Nebraska fan. Who are your other favorite sports teams?
Cleveland Indians and the San Francisco 49ers.
Okay, so who are you most invested in?
Out of college, too?
Out of those teams? Yeah, anybody. Well, okay, not college, no, professional teams, because college teams aren't going to move. So professional teams.
The 49ers, probably.
Okay, that doesn't really help. Well, because you're already out of close proximity.
Let's just say you're a Chiefs fan. You're a diehard Chiefs fan. You're Farzine right now. You're a Chiefs fan.
Okay, I'm Farzine.
Okay, so yeah, how would you feel if the Chiefs moved? I guess because that'd be a big devastating thing. Farzine, if you listen to this, we're sorry.
I imagine I would feel the same way you do, Robert. I don't know.
Well, no. If you okay, well, let's rephrase it. Put yourself in the shoes of somebody. Like if you cared about that, like if you had a professional team in Nebraska and they moved and they were there for a while for 20, 30 years, how would you feel if they moved?
Probably the same way you do, rather than the way that Nate is. I'm sure I would make it more of an emotional. The same way St. Louis Rams are reacting right now, I'd probably be doing the same thing, complaining about it and being pissed off.
Like, my whole thing, what teams, you guys just wouldn't have a favorite NFL team?
I would not have a favorite NFL team.
So
absolutely not, because I would be disillusioned by the NFL. In fact, I might watch less NFL football because the Bears wouldn't.
I don't know.
See, I wouldn't.
I would probably pick one. I don't know how I would go about it.
Yeah, but at that point, like,
you grew up, like, for me, I grew up a Patriots fan my whole life, and then all of a sudden they moved, and now it's like, oh, let's go Jets. I couldn't do that. I couldn't will myself to do that.
Here's another example. Let me flip the script here. If all of a sudden, and I'm not going to use San Francisco, I'll use a different team. Let's say the, I don't know, Arizona Cardinals decided they were leaving Phoenix, and they said, we're going to move to Omaha, Nebraska. There's a chance, I don't know, I haven't thought about it, there's a chance I would completely abandon the 49ers and become a fan of the new team in town.
See, yeah. I couldn't do that either.
I'm not sure. It'd be something to consider for sure, to be a fan of a hometown team. I've never had that opportunity before in a professional sport, so that'd be certainly something I would be torn about. So
this is go ahead, Nate. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I could understand like rooting for them, but just to drop off like the Niners in whole or just whatever team. Say if the Patriots never existed, but they moved to Foxborough, and I was already a fan of the Cleveland Browns for some reason, and the Patriots.
Well, that'd be unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, it already is kind of unfortunate. Just the fact that came to my head first just puts me in a bad space. But I would still root for the Browns, but no, yeah, I'd root for the Patriots. Like, it'd be cool to have like a hometown team, but I'd still the Browns would be my number one team. I'd still it's.
See, this is an interesting conversation that branches out more than just the owner's extortionists. It's how we pick our favorite sports teams. Like, Danny, I have no idea how you came to like the Niners when you're living in Nebraska. I mean, are you originally from Nebraska?
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you pick the Niners, for example? That's weird. Were you a bandwagon? Admit it. Were you a bandwagon of the Joe Montana and Steve Young years and all that?
Because in 1995, when I was 10 years old and an impressionable youth, and I had a cousin who was a 49er fan that was 5 or 10 years older than me, I was like, man, these guys are awesome. They won the Super Bowl. They got Joe Montana. They got Jerry Rice, the best player of all time. And so at 10 years old, I latched on to a team that was dominant at that time. And so I've been a fan of theirs for 20 years since then. So that's how.
Quick correction: Walter Payton's the best player of all time, but we don't need to debate that. Nate, how did you? I mean, did you pick the Patriots basically because you live in the Massachusetts area? I mean, that's is it that simple?
Yeah, that's how it was basically for all my teams besides the Cavs. like my dad's a huge Patriots fan. I still remember watching the first Super Bowl in like 2001, like sneaking downstairs, sitting on like the stairs watching it or whatever. And like I was just kind of thrown into like becoming a Patriots fan. I'm sure if I had my own choice, like I did with the NBA, I would still choose the Patriots. But I feel like that's how it is with most people. Like I have friends who are from my same hometown, obviously, but they're fans of like the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Dolphins. So it all depends on if you want to, I guess, fit in with the crowd or be that one kid that just sticks out and hates the hometown team. And that's how I am with NBA, but everything else is hometown.
So it's so weird. It's so weird to me because I don't know. Like, I'm almost sometimes embarrassed to be a Bears fan, but because I only pick them because I live here. But it's weird to me how they pick it. Okay, so as a final sort of note at, of this conversation before we move into our divisional picks, if you guys did lose your hometown team, I know, Danny, you don't have one technically, but put yourself in that situation, and you had to pick a new team to root for, who would you pick? Who's your first choice in the 2015 or 2016 NFL? Either of you two can take this first. This could be something just to mull over, so take a few seconds.
Honestly, I think I may go Bills.
You would go Bills. Why is that? Because the Rex Ryan, Rob Ryan sitcom?
Just everything about the Bills is just interesting. I would become a fan of it and immediately hate becoming a fan just because how bad they've always been, how bad they probably will continue to be for a while. But I just can't see myself becoming a fan of any other team.
Well, we're talking in that hypothetical. So so if you did, you'd pick the Bills.
Yeah, I'd say Bills or Cardinals, I guess. I like Tyrann Mathieu, Patrick Peterson. I was a fan of them in college, but I Bills or Cardinals. Have at it, for sure.
Danny?
I might pick the Bears.
My man, why's that?
He enjoys heartbreak.
Oh, stop.
Well,
We're not Minnesota. We're not Minnesota.
I'm not going to pick a team like a Cowboys or a Steelers or a Patriots for that matter, because all of a sudden then, they're another team that's got 4 and 5 and 6 Super Bowl wins, and then you're
Wait a minute. So you're picking the Bears because no, we don't want you to that.
That's partially it. Also, they are relatively close proximity. They're 8 hours away. My dad was a Bears fan. He still is a Bears fan.
Okay.
So nobody's gonna accuse me of being a bandwagon Bears fan. So that would certainly go into it.
I guess
because they haven't been great for quite a while. So so that's a safe.
We're coming.
And I could realistically get there in a day's drive or a 1 hour flight and go watch a game if I wanted to. So, and they're always the local game. They're always shown on TV.
In Nebraska? Oh, okay.
Yeah. The Packers or the Chiefs.
Well, the Bears probably is the only worthwhile one if we're being honest, right? I'm going to sound like a bandwagon, but I mean, as you guys well know by this point, previous Bears general manager Phil Emery robbed us of Bruce Arians, and the Arizona Cardinals used to be the Chicago Cardinals, and Arizona is in close proximity to Chicago, about a 15, 16-hour drive, so that's very close to me. So I would become a Cardinals fan because I was robbed of Bruce Arians. I was everything that the Cardinals are right now, the Bears should be. They used to be the Chicago Cardinals, and I would absolutely love rooting for Patrick Peterson and Carson Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald. It'd be fun because that should be the Bears right now, and I'm desperate at this point. So I'm not. Call me a bandwagon if you want, but I was robbed. Okay.
If you want a team to root for, you can always root for the Patriots. I have an extra jersey.
I'm good, man. I mean, I don't have anything against the Patriots, but that's too much of a bandwagon because the Cardinals haven't been historically successful. So if anything, if someone does call me a bandwagon, I can be like, oh, they've only been good like the past 2 or 3 years, man. Get the hell out of here, So,
that's like the definition of a bandwagon.
I was robbed. Bruce Arians should have been in Chicago Cardinals. In fact, the next relocation, once they're bad, or once like the fans stop caring in Arizona, Arizona should come back to Chicago. I would love to have two NFL teams. If LA has two NFL teams, if New York has two NFL teams, Chicago should have two NFL teams, and I deserve Bruce Arians. It's that simple.
So you would jump ship from the Bears to the Cardinals?
I would absolutely jump. If Bruce Arians was still coaching the Cardinals and they were relocated to Chicago, I'm off the ship. I'm already frustrated with John Fox's decision making and Jay Cutler's inconsistency, even though he's better than before. I would absolutely jump ship.
It's in rough times. It's in rough times where you show your true colors, Robert.
All right, I don't need a life lecture here. Let's move to our picks, man. I don't need a life lecture.
It's like a 25 to 30 hour drive too. It's a lot longer than 16. So you'd have to drive quite a way.
I think that's interesting. I could do that in one sitting. I wouldn't have to stop. Okay, so divisional round starting up. We had our little teasers from Wild Card Weekend, big things. Chiefs Patriots first up Saturday afternoon. Danny, who wins, score, and why? To move on to the AFC Championship.
Patriots D, they're top 10 defense against quarterbacks and running backs. They're not that strong against wide receivers. But Macklin's really their only big weapon at wide receiver. He's questionable. If he does play, what's his impact? How healthy is he going to be? So really the weak point of the Patriots D is the weak point of the Chiefs offense. Meanwhile, the Patriots are getting weapons back little by little. They get Edelman back this week. The rest of the guys have had 2 weeks off to get healthy, so they're coming in a little stronger than normal. KC's incredible 11 or 12 win streak comes to an end. The Patriots win 38-27.
I like where your head's at. Yeah, basically everything what Danny said.
Obviously, it was picking the Patriots.
I just need
okay, so
Patriots get revenge from last year's beatdown in Kansas City. Tom Brady's healthy. Julian Edelman's healthy. Chandler Jones is not overdosing on synthetic weed. Rob Gronkowski's healthy. Everyone's healthy. We're in Foxborough. Patriots win 37-21.
See, that's my only concern here, and I'm going to go New England too. But they're getting the other guys back. But obviously, Chandler Jones, no one knows what happened there. I mean, surprised that
he's still practicing. He's fine now. He just had a very weird reaction.
Julian Edelman's first game back since his broken foot, but he'll probably be 100% and same old best slot receiver in the league. The offensive line's kind of in shambles, and the last time the Chiefs played the Patriots, a lot of the sort of similar health issues they have now is what Kansas City exploited last time. So I don't think New England runs away with this by any means, but they do have Bill Belichick, and they're still supremely talented. In my mind, they're still the best team in the AFC. Just need another week or two to sort of get healthy and get everything back in gelling. I like New England in a close one, 24-17. Let's move over to what's the Saturday night? Packers at Cardinals. We teased this earlier. Nate and I both sort of spoiled our picks, so Danny, you go first on this one.
Arizona's looked solid all year up until this last week when they got destroyed, or the week prior. They didn't play this week, but prior to that, they won 9 straight, most of them pretty convincingly. Seattle did expose some things during that game, but they've also been arguably the most dominant team in the NFL, also up until last week when they had a pretty rough game. Arizona's mostly healthy. They've had a week off. The Packers are still the Packers. They lost their last 2 games of the regular season, and they snuck into the playoffs somehow. So they surprisingly beat a Washington team with an Aaron Rodgers that actually looked like Aaron Rodgers. So can he do it again? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't think he can personally against that Arizona defense. So I got the Cardinals winning 36-21.
Yeah, the answer is no, he can't. That's Cardinals win. They're just too good. Aaron Rodgers. Like I said, if he throws for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, maybe they have a chance, but Cardinals win 38-17.
Like I said, the only way that the Packers can pull off the upset is if they hire Jim Bob Cooter, because the Cardinals have no weaknesses. Even without Tyrann Mathieu, I mean, their secondary is still loaded. They still have all-pro players at every level in that defense. All-pro players on their offensive line. David Johnson's a future star. Receivers loaded. Carson Palmer likely second in the MVP voting, Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, my adopted team, the Chicago Cardinals, are going to blow out the Packers again. It won't be as bad as last time, but they're going to be in Rodgers' face all day. It's a laugher. I'm kind of disappointed that it's the primetime game and that Seattle, Carolina isn't honestly scheduled Saturday night. But, yeah, the Arizona moves on to the NFC title game. Moving over to Sunday afternoon, as I just mentioned it, Seahawks and Carolina, in my opinion, the best matchup of the weekend. We talked about that they play similar styles, how Seattle might be the worst matchup for Carolina possible of everybody. Nate, who wins and why? Who moves on to the NFC title game to play Arizona? If we're on that consensus. This is probably the toughest pick as well.
I'll go with the Panthers just because how Cam Newton's been playing. If those receivers can hold up another game, then that'll definitely be key, I guess, if I want to be obvious. But I'll say it's a low-scoring affair. Panthers win 23-19. We'll get to 19 somehow.
Okay. Danny?
So Seattle's looked just downright dominant, with the exception of their 0-degree game this last weekend, like we said. That they should have lost it, but they didn't, so they advanced, and maybe it woke them up to, hey, we are beatable. But they could potentially go from a team that should have lost to possibly winning this game and advancing to the NFC Championship Super Bowl. So they haven't really played anybody, especially in that NFC South, but everybody that they did play, they handled them. They've got the MVP at quarterback, and their defense is pretty damn good too, especially against quarterbacks who they're coming up against one of the best ones in the NFL here this weekend. But I think they shut them down. I think it's a real low-scoring game, kind of like Nate said. I got Carolina 20-17.
And I'm going to be the contrarian. I think Seattle, like you guys said, escaped, but they still have Russell Wilson. They still have all that pedigree. I think they play this defense and mobile quarterback style better than Carolina. I think they're going to really beat up Carolina's receivers, and there won't be that much room to work with for Cam Newton. And we're going to have an NFC West matchup in the NFC title game. I think Seattle takes this one 20-14. Finally, to set the championship weekend up, Steelers-Broncos. Steelers have all those injuries. The Broncos have Peyton Manning, who is 0-5 all-time in games that are less than 40 degrees in cold weather, and he is starting after all of his controversy with the HGH allegations and his health issues with plantar fascia. Antonio Brown may not play. Ben Roethlisberger is certainly going to be limited. Sunday afternoon late game. Who wins? Danny.
Steelers' offense is still a force to be reckoned with. Cincinnati held them to only 18 points last weekend, but it was enough for them to squeak it out anyway. With a noodle-armed Peyton Manning at quarterback, I still think he shows up, and I think it's enough, especially in combo with that strong defense, the best defense in the league. I think it's enough. I think the Patriots got enough weapons. They got big-time weapons at wide receivers. His running backs are coming around with Hillman and C.J. Anderson actually showing up for the first time this last few weeks. I think Owen Daniels is actually going to have a monster game at tight end this weekend. And that defense, I think they just put a stop to Big Ben. Antonio Brown might not play. If he does, I don't think he replicates his 16-catch, 2-touchdown, 200-yard game that he had in Week 15. I think Denver's defense is just too much. I think Peyton Manning surprises a lot of people this weekend, and I got Broncos in a pretty one-sided game, actually, 41-21.
Nate?
41 points. Oh, that's a lot of touchdowns for Noodle Payton. Yeah, I'll go with the Broncos too. I think Payton goes back to his old form, throws a couple picks. Brock Osweiler comes in, saves the day. The Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger, depending on how healthy he is, you never really know. He could go out on a wheelchair like Paul Pierce, come back and win the finals like he did. You
on
never
the field.
Yeah, you never know with that. That's just who he is. He's a very, very dramatic when it comes to injuries, I guess. But the Broncos' defense is too much. They'll carry them 24-20, and then Broncos win. Yeah.
Okay. And as I said for the Packers, the only way I see the Broncos coming out of this game is if they hire Jim Bob Cooter to formulate some kind of game plan for them. Because Peyton Manning, that 0-5 statistic speaks volumes to me. I mean, this is a guy, 39 years old, on the edge. I mean, he's been playing this game for almost 2 decades. He's had 5 neck surgeries. He's coming off another injury. They say he's the healthiest he's been all season, but what does that have to do with anything? He's historically a guy that has trouble in cold weather, playing in cold weather. And last year was the same kind of issue. They played against the Colts, so everybody considered an inferior team. And he looked completely incompetent, couldn't complete any passes. We're in the same situation. The Steelers are by no means a dominant team. They're similarly formulated like the Colts, where they have a really impressive passing attack that, like Andrew Luck did, and with Ben Roethlisberger on the Steelers side. I don't see Payton being able to put enough points. I see the Steelers defense beating up Payton. Payton's not exactly gonna be able to exploit their biggest weakness in the secondary. And I think we've been destined destined to have this matchup sort of all season, other than talking about the Bengals. Steelers and Patriots in the AFC title game. Ben will be limited, but he'll be able to play well. Steelers 30, Broncos 16. I just think the Broncos they're too flawed, built around Peyton. They don't match up well enough against what Pittsburgh doesn't do well. So if we're off the consensus though, NFC title, Arizona and Carolina are the majority picks, and Denver and New England are the majority picks. But when we talk conference championships next weekend, we'll know who turned out to have the right picks. But that should just about do it for today's show, though. I do want to note, Powerball is in about 2 hours. So if any of us win it, to whoever's listening, it's been nice. Me personally, it's been nice talking to you guys. I shouldn't have said that I'm guaranteed to be back next week, because if I do win the $1.3 billion, I won't be. It's been fun for a while. But the Powerball and the money and buying a house in the Hamptons, Malibu just takes precedence. I just have to say it. I don't know what you guys would necessarily do with the money. If you want to mention that quickly before we move out, that'd be cool too. Danny, what would you do with the money?
What would I do with the money? It's not quite enough to buy the 49ers from Jed York. Probably they're probably in the $2 to $3 billion range, but it'd certainly be a good down payment. Maybe I'd go in halvesies with somebody else that's big time. Some of those Silicon Valley guys, maybe the guy that owns Oracle, whatever his name is. I think I could do that, and then with all the money I make from my newly founded NFL franchise, you wouldn't see me too much except for in the press, but up in the owner's box on Sundays.
Nate.
If it was me, I'd just buy the Golden State Warriors and tear them to the ground.
You know what I would do? Wait, no, sorry. Did you want to add something?
If I want to make it relevant to the NFL, I'll just buy the Bears and I'll move them out of Chicago so you don't have to suffer anymore. And then I'll just make millions off of it. Billions, trillions.
Oh, well, you know what I would do? If I won it, I would move the Patriots from there, or rather, I would disassemble the Patriots. Now they're going to get in that. No, I'm just kidding. I would do anything possible to hire Jim Bob Cooter to put him on the Bears staff, and Super Bowl dynasty started up with that. In all honesty, probably buy a few yachts too, but Jim Bob Cooter would be the priority if I won Powerball. Nonetheless,
you could name one of your yachts Jim Bob Cooter.
I would absolutely have it in like calligraphy on the side. Could you imagine? But yeah, it's been fun, guys. If any of us wins the billion, just holler at your boy, and share a little bit. We've had a fun time. But if we don't, which we might not, there's a strong possibility we might not. But I'm not gonna say that. We stay positive here at No Coast Bias. We'll be back next weekend talking about conference championships. For Danny Troutman, Nate Vieira, I'm Robert Zaglinski. Thanks again for listening, everyone.
I should probably stop the podcast now.